Well, hello there. I'm Lexi, and this is the Prodigal's Purpose podcast. Today, we are going to talk about Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette. And I also want to share my personal connection to this beautiful Marian apparition. So, before I dive into my part of it all, I do want to give some background because not everybody might be familiar with Our Lady of Lourdes. Way back in 1844, Bernadette Soubirous, hopefully I say that right because I'm not French, was born, and she would become the eldest of 9 in her family in a tiny little village of Lourdes, France. Her father was a mill worker, and her mother did some general work of like sewing and just domestic labor and things, and they were very devout Catholics. And growing up, her father was actually injured at the mill, and so he wasn't able to provide for the family, and they came into financial hardships, so much so that this family actually had to downsize, and this family of 11 literally had to like cram and live in this tiny prison cell as kind of a makeshift home while they were trying to make ends meet. So this led their family to a lot of like hard times and a lot of illnesses and lack of education, lack of nourishment. And Bernadette kind of faced those hardships and experienced those as well. She was known as like a sickly and weak child. She didn't know how to read or write. She suffered from asthma, just was really struggling. And so one day her family set her out to go into the woods and to collect some firewood. And so she's kind of behind in the pack of a couple of children that are doing this. But as she's picking up sticks, there's this vision that she sees in this little grotto. And it is a woman dressed in white. And Bernadette just kind of froze. And the two just stared at each other. They didn't even say anything. And Bernadette actually felt compelled to pray the rosary. And so she prayed the rosary with this woman. And the woman vanished. Bernadette doesn't even know who or what she encountered, but she does go home and tell her family what she saw. And sadly, this sweet little 14-year-old was not believed and mocked and ridiculed and just treated so unkindly. And she was actually beaten for saying this because people thought she was making up these lies and to get this attention or something. But even with all of this like accusations and stuff with her, she never changed her story. You know, she never like said, yeah, you're right. I was joking. It was a whatever. She literally clung on to, no, I saw this and this happened. And so another day she went back and she saw this woman again, and they just stared at each other. And then the third time the woman spoke and she said, will you come back and visit me 15 more times? And at this point, Bernadette is like, yes, but like, can you tell me who you are? And the woman declines to give her her name or anything. And so now news is starting to spread around of like, what is happening? This Bernadette chick is starting to see things. She gets like cross-examined with officers. The church is doubting her. I mean, it's not any positive attention or fame. And her family is actually quite embarrassed by it and kind of doubts it and doesn't really know what to think. Bernadette continues to visit this woman, and she even like offers this woman a pen to write her name down, and this woman continues to refuse. On one of the 4th visits, Bernadette brings a blessed candle, and it's going to eventually start this tradition of this candle procession, which we'll get into later. But she brings a blessed candle. She continues to come. Sometimes she prays. Sometimes the woman speaks to her. Sometimes she doesn't. But now there's starting to be this buzz, and people are starting to hear about these weird visions and things that are happening. Or while this woman is communicating with Bernadette, she says things like, pray the rosary, pray for sinners, encourage sinners to repent, trust in God, have faith in God. So keeping the record straight, she never once, pushes weird, non-Christian alternatives, motives, things. But anyways, so over time, people start following Bernadette to go see this chick. And at one point, the woman tells Bernadette to dig at the ground. Okay. And she's like kind of in this like cave thing. And so Bernadette starts digging in the ground. And as she's just digging with her hands, this spring comes out of it. This spring comes out, and there's no reason for there to be a spring there. It makes no sense. But the woman tells Bernadette to wash herself off and to drink the water. And so Bernadette does that. And this is where everything kind of changes and starts to get crazy. As more people come, this woman that was paralyzed, she put her arm in the water and it was instantaneously healed. And there's no reason for it. And so now people are experiencing these miracles with this spring water. And so as these visions continue, there's a lot of, do we believe it? Do we not? I don't know. And eventually a crowd kind of starts to form. Like 8,000 people are watching Bernadette. Now, whenever these apparitions happen, nobody sees the woman themselves. Bernadette is the only one that can see her. But they said that there's just this kind of supernatural experience that goes on when it does occur. There's like this stillness in the atmosphere. Bernadette's face changes. She kind of like locks in and freezes. She kind of seems to be like in this trance. And so there is kind of a buildup in the public eye of what's going on in Lourdes. And there's a couple of other weird encounters. At one point, Bernadette was holding a candle and had her hand in the flame for multiple minutes and never reacted to pain, didn't have any burn marks. Things were just, not adding up. And a lot of people were concerned of like, is she faking it? Is she not? So the buildup continues. And then on the 16th visit, okay, so Bernadette's been doing this a lot. On the 16th visit, the woman finally says something to kind of indicate who she is. And remember, Bernadette can't read, can't write, sickly, poorest of the poor. Like, it's kind of insane that somebody would be having these kind of encounters and they would pick this person, And the lady says, I am the Immaculate Conception. And so Bernadette is like, what the heck is that? And the priest and the bishops of these areas have been asking Bernadette, like, who is she? What does she say she is? And Bernadette has no way of identifying her. And so there's just a lot of skepticism of what's going on. And so sweet little Bernadette, like, doesn't even know this word, but she literally runs all the way back to the church to speak to the bishop. And she's like, Immaculate Conception, Immaculate Conception, Immaculate Conception, like trying to remember this. So she finally says it to the church leaders, and they kind of look at themselves in astonishment because literally only 4 years prior, the church had established the dogma, so a church teaching, they've established that Mary, the Mother of God, had an immaculate conception, which means she was born without sin. 4 years. That's fresh, especially in the 1800s. And we all know that this little girl has no clue, has no way of knowing this, okay? And so with that, the church begins a full-on investigation. They check into the spring, they check into the miracles, and they have, enough evidence and enough truth revealed that they do verify this as a true Marian apparition. Mary has appeared in a lot of different places, but it is a beautiful and miraculous place, and a lot of holy and beautiful things have happened. Not necessarily all verified, healing miracles, but a lot of conversions, growth in their faith, and really cool things just have happened. And the one thing I really love about my faith is our history. Our faith is tangible. You can go and see these amazing things in places where saints lived. And so Bernadette, when she becomes 22, she feels called to join a religious order. And in the religious order, she actually faces more hardships. A lot of the sisters snub her of like, oh, Bernadette, blah, blah, blah. Don't really treat her that well. She had no special role, no special authority. She rarely talked about the apparition. Like she wasn't hungry for the fame. That was like one of the big key places of like, if she was doing this for popularity, for money, for fame, her and her family did a terrible job of doing it, or they just straight up didn't want to, which they didn't want to. And so she lives a quiet convent life and sadly passes away at the age of 35 due to illness. And so they bury her, and then later on there is like kind of a call for a canonization, which in the Catholic faith, if there is proof or a notion that, hey, this person lived a holy life, they might be in heaven, there are actually like scientific and tangible ways that we look into that. And one way is we exhume their body and have like a medical examination of their body. And so, based on Bernadette's involvement with the apparitions of Lourdes and just how she lived her life and lived out her faith and her convictions, a lot of people said, I wonder if she might be a saint. And so they exhumed her body, and they exhumed her body 3 times. And when they did this, there was no odor. Her skin was fully intact. Her organs were still there. This is insane. Her body, her joints were still flexible. Like there wasn't this like stiffness, and like the decomposition just wasn't there. So we call that incorruptible. And that in of itself is kind of a miracle or a sign from heaven of the inexplainable, especially since she like was buried in this damp grave. Like you should be decomposed and become worm food, right? And so that doesn't happen. And she eventually was canonized on the feast day of the Immaculate Conception, which is really cool, just to tie in her full experience. So that is Miss Lexi's quick history lesson on Lourdes. Now, my experience of Lourdes. I went as a little 15-year-old girl, and I didn't realize the first time that I went to Lourdes, that I was standing at the beginning of something God would later bless me with and reveal to me 15 years after that. So how it all began. My mama went to World Youth Day, which is this beautiful kind of like pilgrimage movement where all the youth of the world come together in a different location all around the world, and the Pope visits them and kind of gives them, a community building opportunity, proof that the church is truly alive and young, and there's this energy about our faith, but then also a message to the youth. It's called World Youth Day. Pope John Paul II started it. And my mom had an amazing experience with her family when they went when he was in Denver. And she literally kind of vowed to herself, I'm going to make sure every one of my children gets an experience to go to World Youth Day. And so as I'm in this kind of high school era, my mom learns that there is a World Youth Day conference coming up in Madrid, Spain. And my uncles, who are just 2 and 4 years older than me, are kind of around that teenage, young adult age, and I'm a little 15-year-old, and my mom thought this is the perfect time to do that. And so I was able to go, and then one of my uncles, Drew, who's 4 years older than me, he was also able to go. And so a part of our pilgrimage, so a pilgrimage is like a religious trip for spiritual purposes, okay? You're not going to be vacationing. You're not going to be in the nicest resort, living that bougie lifestyle. You're kind of backpacking, you're kind of roughing it, but you're also purposefully going to spiritual places and kind of for a spiritual purpose, okay? And so a part of our pilgrimage was stopping in Our Lady of Lourdes. And so I will tell you right now, I was a stupid little 15-year-old. I did not understand the pilgrimage part. I just saw vacation and I was like, yeah, I want to go. So cool. And so we went to Lourdes. And when you go to Lourdes, it's crazy. It doesn't seem real. It's just on this little hillside. I mean, it shouldn't be as popularized as it is. Mary appeared into one of the humblest little communities and villages. And it's half on a hill, honestly. But there's a lot of tourism, so you definitely see the tourism side. But then once you enter into the basilica that they built, that Our Lady requested, and the grotto and the baths and all these things, you kind of just it's kind of weird, literally crossing the gate or crossing that threshold, you feel the energy there and you realize this is someplace sacred, this is someplace special and holy and beautiful. Now, all around you are these volunteers. They have these blue aprons or blue vests, and they're pulling and pushing people in wagons or kind of carts or wheelchairs because they are hoping to bathe in that water for a miracle, okay? So it is definitely a holy site. And a lot of people are really focused on praying for those physical healings, but there's a lot of spiritual healings as well. And so the first time I went, I was just taking it all in like a sponge, but also not probably fully appreciating and processing what was happening. But it is kind of cool that I was able to visit that kind of around the same age as Bernadette. She was 14 when Mary appeared to her. I was 15. And I'm just kind of taking over it all in. I'm very overwhelmed. So many people, but it's really cool. And one of the first things is we are in line to go to the baths. And it's a long line. You are standing in line for 2 hours. And so I was dragging my feet and holy cow, this is long. And while they're doing that, they're singing the rosary. And in between each decade, they sing the Ave Maria. And it's really beautiful, but I wore my swimsuit under my dress because I'm this is weird. I'm not doing this, whatever. And so you go for physical or spiritual, some kind of healing or some kind of prayer request. Okay. So there's a women's line and a men's line. And I was terrified. So I made my cousin go before me. But it's kind of cool. When you go in, there are these different stalls almost, and they have different volunteers that speak your language. And I even dug up my old little travel journal I had. And I remember I was kind of going through it at that phase and kind of having a rough go at life and having my own little teenage struggles. I said I was worried because I wanted my spiritual intention to come true so bad. I want a stronger faith. When I went into the baths, I was in the number 1 stall. The ladies were extremely kind and kept telling me I have beautiful eyes. Then they held up a blue towel and told me to remove my clothes, and I sat and waited my turn. I stepped into a room where a bath was. The women helped me switch into a white towel, and they told me to think of my special intention in the silence of my heart. I walked into the bath and sat down, and they told me to lay back in the water. The water was so cold. Total 15-year-old mind. When I left the baths, I felt very refreshed, and strangely, it was like I started over or something. Then we prayed a rosary in the grotto where Mary appeared to Bernadette. And then I give a whole rundown of the awesome food I ate. But it was weird. It was one of my first like intentional spiritual things I've done. And I remember just coming out of it and I felt weird. I just felt weird. Not like a bad weird, but like, And like that was it. That's all I really felt. We had mass. We stayed there for like 2 or 3 days. We did this beautiful candlelit procession where we sing the rosary in different languages. And anytime in between decades, you like raise up your candles and like the whole grounds were just like covered in lights. And beneath, there's this huge Eucharist, beneath the basilica, there's this huge like underground place, church probably, where they have like the Eucharistic procession too. We got to partake in that. And we also got to wait in line and be able to like walk in the grotto and touch the stone. And it was just nuts. And back then I was just so naive, so immature, kind of taking things a little bit superficially, I think, of like, this will be so cool to tell everybody. I went to Our Lady of Lourdes. I don't think I like, woke up and I'm like, I am changed now, right? Like, that's not my story. But a lot of beauty and goodness came from that trip. I came back, yes, with like this energy and like, wow, that was a cool trip and like the surface level part of it all. But I did have a little bit more ownership in my faith. And I did have a little bit of like, there's something true in that. Like there are some like really cool, hardcore faith evidence. Like I saw Saint Bernadette's incorruptible body. Like there are some things that I think I tucked in the back of my mind and deep in my heart of there is some true goodness going on in that place. Don't know what it is. I don't know if I like believe it, but I saw it and I encountered it. Now, I didn't, go home a changed woman or anything like that. I did pray for a stronger faith, and I don't think that was fulfilled until later on in life. But some really cool prayer intentions my mom had is she has 2 women in her family who were struggling with infertility. And so she prayed for their intentions. And that next year, they both expected and had healthy babies. She prayed especially for my Uncle Drew, who was there for his vocation. And later on, from that trip and that experience he had, he really felt called to the priesthood and became a priest. And, later on in my life, I did finally surrender and tear down my walls and invite God into my mess. That in God's timing, I think that stronger faith intention was truly answered. But last year, there was a beautiful opportunity to go on another pilgrimage with my Uncle Drew and my mom again, but also with my mom's parents, Nana and Pa, and with my little brother, Aiden. And we went to a lot of places, but we did stop in Lourdes, especially for my Nana, because that was a really special place she's always wanted to visit. And so that second time coming back, I don't know. The minute I crossed the gates again and entered in, I felt like I was returning home. Definitely was a deja vu, which is like, no doubt, like, you literally were there before. But like, so much has changed. So much has happened. So much good and bad. I mean, since the last time I was there, I've, fallen into sin and fallen into really hard and low times and finally believed everything Jesus has always said about me and to me and desire for me. And I've been able to share that with people, which has been really cool. My beautiful little sister Gianna was born in between all that. My dad had a beautiful encounter with God through his journey with cancer. And, we lost him and he passed away. And it was weird. It was like this returning was just this beautiful, like, full circle moment kind of like, this was one of my first stops on my pilgrimage. And this was one of the first times I like genuinely asked God for something that wasn't like winning the lottery or something superficial or something limited. I asked for stronger faith, and he and Our Lady delivered in so many different ways. And so going there, I think I wasn't as starstruck the second time. And I just kind of was a sponge and like soaked it up a lot more. I did a lot more like sitting and just like watching the grotto and praying the rosary and just like seeing the people. And I noticed like on top of the grotto, there is still this like countryside, and there's still, you hear the bells, and there's sheep like eating grass on top of the grotto. Like there's a huge basilica right next to it, but then there's like still sheep and just this simple French life. And the line was too long and too limited for us to bathe again. But from COVID, they have this like other option you can do where you can pray and have a blessing for or with the water, and like kind of a prayer with the water without like being fully submerged. And so my Nana, my Pa, my mom, and I decided to do that. And we did the 3 things that Bernadette did the first time Our Lady asked Bernadette to like dig from the spring. And so we drank the water, we washed our face with the water, and then we also washed our hands and blessed ourselves with the water. And I do remember that part of my like prayer, and that was Thanksgiving, and then also was kind of with a different element of confidence, kind of a different confidence in a request and continuing the path I'm on. It was so surreal and beautiful, and it was really cool to go back to the place that changed my uncle and I's life forever in very different ways. I mean, he came back as a priest and was able to honor Mass when he was just a little college kid the last time he was there. And also it was really cool to see the excitement and the newness in my little brother's eyes. He did get to bathe and experience Lourdes for the first time. And that was just really beautiful and cool. And we got to do the candlelight procession again. And I just think that this just reminds me that you got to trust the process. And God answers prayers in his own timing. And there's no question or ask or request that is too big or too stupid or too small or too whatever. But also that when you lay your desires down, he always picks them up and he always sees them. And he always will do what's best for you. And I think that, I wanted stronger faith that first time. I don't think that was the time that I needed to really lock in and take serious my faith. Not saying that time was wasted, but that just wasn't his timing. That was my timing. And I also know for a fact that one of my mom's prayer requests when she first went there was for me. And was for healing for me. And it was really beautiful for her to, like, just a few years ago, reveal that to me of, when we went to Lourdes, you were on my list too. And seeing how I've changed and grown, and she's watched that, she's so confident that, Our Lady took her request, like a mother's request, and gave it to God. And she was so happy to see that fulfillment through the blessings that God has given me. And so, there's a couple things. Number one, who doesn't love to nerd out about their faith? And number two, I love the history and I love a good storyline and I love a good plot. But I think like the big takeaway from my experience or my story, there's a lot, is no request is too small or too stupid to God. If it's important to you, it's important to him. And I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. I'm just like in awe. I'm in awe of God. I'm in awe of all the things he can do and all the things he can get you through when you really don't think you can go through it. I did go back to Lourdes with Thanksgiving, but I also went back to Lourdes, like I said before, with a confidence of like, Lord, my heart is broken right now and I am struggling to trust in your timing and your plan in a different way, and laying that down to him, but like knowing him and our Mother Mary, they've had my back before and they're going to have it again. And I also just think that story is so inspiring to me, because sometimes I think we get intimidated and we see the saints and we see these holy, incredible people in our lives who like can do public speaking and have lived these amazing, Catholic experiences and have led people to Jesus. And you're like, I'm just me. I can't do anything like that, And hearing how Our Lady used Bernadette, an uneducated, poor, sickly, stupid, she's not, little girl who came from nothing and had nothing to gain, but the only constant she had in her life was her faith, and she knew she encountered something real at that grotto and she would not give that up. Her story never changed. Her conviction never changed. She stayed committed to Our Lady when she said, will you come back 15 more times? Like, this wasn't a one and done thing. From February all the way to July, like she was visiting and, doing what was asked of her. And I just love that God is always full of surprises, and God always picks the people we least expect. And so, there's times I don't feel worthy and I don't feel good enough, but I'm so inspired by Bernadette of, if I live my faith with confidence and if I keep going to him, he's going to use me for good. He will. He'll do it in his own timing, in his own way, and in ways I'll never understand or expect, but he will. So if you kind of feel, useless, or, you don't see how God could use you or use your story, he's not done yet. And his timing is just chef's kiss, impeccable. And sometimes the healings and the requests and the prayers that we desire or ask of him transform us and heal us and bring us closer to God in ways you never would have expected. But it always turns out beautiful and amazing. So, a couple of things I've already said, but I really do encourage you that hearing these different stories of faith, especially, when they occur after the Bible, I really encourage you to look into it. Our faith is insane and it's ever changing, and God and the saints constantly find ways to communicate with us and to help us and to find new paths for us to grow closer to God. And so you need to explore it. It's so cool. And I also think that sometimes we can get in a rut when you just, go to your parish and go to mass, and I'm not taking beauty out of it. But if you ever get an opportunity or chance to go on a pilgrimage and to live and experience and walk the steps of the saints, literally at the basilica, they have a painted blue line from the grotto all the way to Bernadette's home. And I got to walk the path this saint walked to and from Mary. It changes you. I mean, even after that first time I went there 15 years ago, something changed. I was too dumb and stupid to understand, but something changes in you. It's just the reality of our faith and the realness of our faith. It's so beautiful and it's so cool. And, sometimes when you do need that encouragement, having it in a tangible way is just such a beautiful gift from God to give us that reassurance that sometimes we as humans just need. And so look into it. I think it's just so beautiful and fascinating and cool to see all the things God can do and the way he uses Our Lady to help us in that process too. There's something about a mama's love, But I especially want to dedicate this episode for anyone who has a strong desire for healing, whether it's spiritual or physical. I want to offer this episode for you, and I'm praying for you. And please continue to pray that this podcast is doing whatever God wills of it. But I want to thank you for listening. Look into Our Lady of Lourdes. She's prettybomb.com, or Saint Bernadette. But through it all, never forget to ponder the purpose, embrace the journey, and live the conversion. Thank you.